Good evening, everyone. Good morning or afternoon, depends when you're actually clicking onto this YouTube video, but it's evening for us, and we welcome you to another episode of Pages to Progress, where we go into the book, The Sonship of Christ. We're hitting some more chapters in this book. You probably can't see it well on the screen. Maybe John or Dee can show you the book. Thank you. Today we are discussing chapters 13 to chapters 16, chapters 13 to 16. And then next week, we will be finishing the book. It's a book that we highly recommend. I want to thank Dee, John, and Joe for joining us again for another episode. Thanks for being with me as we go deeper. We are hoping to be able to extract some really important themes. We believe the Bible to be something that is profoundly given to humanity to transform humanity in every way, shape, or form. And sometimes, and more often than not, sometimes we need help through different authors to unveil things that we possibly didn't quite see as plain as day. And we're grateful to the ministry of Ty Gibson and others that we read who enable us to point to this incredibly great light, the Bible. Today, as we go through chapters 13 to 16, we're going to be briefly touching on the book of Hebrews and how that impacts our view on the sonship of God. We're going to be also looking at the title, the Son of Man. We've noticed that title throughout Scripture quite often. And also today, if I can turn my pages, we are going to be looking at the idea of the last Adam, and finally, the eternal covenant pledge. Those are the four things that we're going to be looking at. So why don't we kick off firstly talking about the idea of that, the ideas that are communicated in the book of Hebrews. Hebrews is a very interesting book. There's a lot of imagery talking about the Hebrew sanctuary in the book of Hebrews and how that plays its part in the identity of the sonship of Christ is really quite powerful. So let me start by this and say that Hebrews, at least what Ty Gibson is trying to do, I feel, Ty Gibson is trying to accentuate the strategic position of Jesus, not as an ontological son before the incarnation, but as one who is appointed and accredited a title so that humanity can find ourselves in sibling brotherhood with him, if I'm being clear. Does that make sense, guys, the way I've put it across? Okay. Does anyone want to try and expand on what this chapter did for them, or maybe some nuggets that really struck out at you that when you read this chapter that was quite profound?
Sure. I'd like to start by saying that one part of the that chapter that kind of really kind of stuck with me and made me think about this was the idea that that where we were perhaps in relation to angels. Now, it's not something that we like want to brag about, because in a situation where we're like, oh, I want to be better than my brother or my sister or whatever, sometimes that could kind of offend somebody else on the other end. Oh, I'm going to be better than you one day. I'm going to be, when my brother was younger, I could always wrestle him down, but then one day I saw him get bigger and taller and stronger, and that's my younger brother Marvin. And so if I were to ever have him say, Joe, my brother, I'm going to be bigger than you one day, I would probably not be too happy with that. But in a situation where, when God created Adam and Eve, they were created a little below the angels. And through time, and because of a special relationship that we had with God, maybe this closeness to be able to share this covenantal relationship, that it was like this torch that was given to us, that one day we'd understand the love of God and we would proclaim it to the universe. And then we would eventually, with that relationship and kind of co-relationship with God, covenant relationship, we would maybe rise a little higher and understanding. And that's probably how we were created, and then we were able to then maybe rise above the angels. And yet Adam and Eve were given that opportunity, but it didn't happen. But this is where Jesus comes along and says, he took on that torch, he took on that responsibility, he finished it through, while the maybe all throughout the sons of God in the previous chapters, they were given opportunities. Israel was given that opportunity, but it just didn't happen. So finally Jesus does, and now he brings it home, I guess we could say. And then now we are able to be able to eventually see this come to reality, that through Jesus Christ we will maybe perhaps rise above the angels and
So
understand.
question, Joe, as I respond to you,
Sure.
are you saying that mankind was from a position of ownership, that mankind were created lower than the angels at creation, or we became lower than the angels as a result of sin? Which are you saying?
I think that from what I understand, that we were created a little bit below the angels,
Okay.
and then through this relationship that we have, an opportunity, we have this relationship with covenant relationship with God, being the Son of God. Remember, Adam was given that title at the very beginning, right? Son of God was attributed to Adam, and he had the image of God given to him. And pre-fall, he was given this wonderful opportunity to showcase the world what it means to follow God, obey God, love God, have this relationship with God. And if you keep his laws and follow and obey him, then you would be blessed, and everybody would be revealed God's image and God's character. And I think that was, from my understanding, was Adam's right and given opportunity. He failed. And of course, we go into the ownership of the world and how it gave to Satan and all that. But I think that, yeah, the question you asked me is, through the fall, did he become below the angels? At creation, was Adam above the angels? I think that it was given, from my understanding, he was below the angels, and through time, he was given the opportunity to rise above. Now, and again, the rest of you tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe did he fall below the angels after the fall, and then through Jesus, who came into this picture, he rose above again? But my reading was that Adam was given this opportunity, and I thought I read he messed it up. He missed it, and so now Jesus takes it over, and now he does what Adam couldn't do.
I'm interested to know what you think, Dee and John, in response to that. Any thoughts?
I think that I don't necessarily think that he was created lower than the angels, as in like in abilities wise, but at the time of creation, yes, his position or his abilities or whatever that might be was lower, and definitely God's plan was that he was going to bring the mankind above the angels in terms of ruling the universe, ruling the world. So that maybe in that sense that he would be above the angels in that role, in that position. But I'm not sure if just do you understand what I'm saying? Is that like given his asset wise, I'm not sure.
No, I get that. John, any thoughts you want to add to that?
So my understanding was that being created in the image of God put us slightly above angels, which were also created beings. And it was my understanding that the fall obviously dropped us below. And I don't have any, I couldn't back that up scripturally, but I think you're kind of discussing what's on page 125, I think.
122 to 125, yeah.
And yeah, so on page 125, they talk about Hebrews 2, 5, and then 7. And I always interpreted this verse for a little while lower than angels, as in for the time when we're under the curse of sin.
Right.
And that we get reinstated so that we're above. But boy, I'd have to get into some study on my own before I could back that up.
Sure.
And I don't know I don't know if it's a hill I'd want to die on, honestly.
Fair enough. I hear that, and I'll be fair enough. I'll be fair and give my own opinion, as I asked for all of yours and challenge Joe on his as well. I have to be honest and say I am more inclined to the idea that God's placed the level of importance of humanity directly under him in terms of strategic power, authority, in terms of all kinds of things. And I am of the view that Adam lost that right because of sin. And I am of the view that Christ became a man in order to raise humanity back into that hierarchy, I guess, in some, but also Joe offers a very, very valid point. This isn't about trying to have a one up or a one over. Mm-hmm. This is about a God who wants to communicate to mankind, you were made for more than this, more right. than what you are going through, more than what you were achieving. And the whole idea of Jesus becoming, and later on we'll talk a little bit more about this, the Son of Man, was to establish a position that invites humanity to become the rightful caretakers of the positions that God had entrusted with humanity. And that's echoed in the reality that Adam lost the earth to Satan, which we talked about, I think, in some previous chapters.
It's interesting because, ironically enough, we aren't the only fallen beings as human beings, because the angels are fallen beings as well. But, while you're talking about that, it's interesting that the plan of salvation, mm-hmm. and we're talking about this, how this was all set up beforehand and it's all, coming to play through the Old Testament and New Testament, was to save human beings. And I guess the question I had is, where's the plan to save? Or is there a plan to save angels? Oof. And what's the difference between the two?
John decides to open up the can of worms. But it's a good question, a very good question. Joe, you had something on the tip of your tongue. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. I guess the reason
I'm not putting aside your question, John. We'll come to that in a second.
Now I want to answer that question too, John, because I think that's a good question to answer. But I was again, mine's on location 1034. Again, mine's a Kindle book. So, but it's a paragraph that's right before that Hebrews chapter or paragraph. But it says this. This language is this paragraph saying this language indicates a temporary or provisional status that is to be surpassed, meaning our fallen lower state. The fall of Adam and Eve interrupted God's original plan for human development. If our original representative heads, Adam and Eve, parentheses Genesis 1:28, had remained in faithful relation to mm-hmm. God and one another, the human race as God's unique image bearers would have naturally superseded the angelic order in some sense, perhaps in intimacy with God and in general servant leadership of the entire universe. All that was forfeited by the fall. So that right. paragraph, I took it as, even Ty Gibson says that we are created below the angels. Had we stayed the course, we would eventually learned mm-hmm. and given the right and have experienced the closer relationship and walk with God that would then have superseded even that of the angels. But again, that was forfeited from the fall. So that's how I took what Ty was thinking. Maybe I took it wrong, but that's why. And then, of course, I agree with you that since Jesus came into the picture, not pre-fall, but post-fall, already below the angels, and he even took it even a step farther. He had all the disadvantages that Adam and Eve didn't have. But yeah,
very interesting, and not to dwell on this, but I think this really grants us riveting discussion on the topic, which leads us into some of the questions that, like the one that John just posed, the one where, so what about the rest of the angels? What about all the others? Does anybody have any thoughts on that question before we move on? That's a really good question.
Understanding, John, was that their probation, their grace was actually given to them, and that was in heaven, meaning that the whole all this happened in God's backyard when Satan, with full knowledge of God's glory. Remember, he was number one in status, and all the other angels who were around him, and they fell, right? And I imagine there was a period of time that a lot more got convinced by his deception, and then given opportunities, even Jesus and God had to come to Satan and work with him and give him opportunities to back out and still be reinstated to where he was, and that goes for all the other angels. And I think at that point, a lot of them had to make that final decision, and just like we are going to be given our final decision just to stand for our, I guess, probation. I think they had theirs in heaven, and once they made the final decision, that was kind of their ultimate decision. That was the unpardonable sin that they had to make the final choice. And when they were kicked out of heaven, that's what kind of, I think, secured their ability to come back to heaven or not. And so
reading this section, I couldn't help wondering if Lucifer knew of this plan, the plan of God to, put
I've got some really good questions coming up today.
Humans above the angels, and I wonder how that had affected him.
See, I think D, you're hitting on something my conclusion, honestly, and again, there's no scripture per se to substantiate it, but then this is all in hindsight. But I think Lucifer got basically tunnel vision to the point where his objective became to destroy the Son of God. And I think by destroying the Son of God, he thought he would forever be able to control the earth. And I don't think he had any idea that the Son of God had to die to save us from the sins, and that by destroying him, he was accomplishing God's will. And then I don't think he had any idea that a resurrection was an option, and that would put him up to the right hand of God and forever the ruler of this earth until, I've heard some people say that it'll eventually get handed back to Adam at some point. But I agree with you. I think this was a cosmic mistake on Satan's part,
right,
that he can never go back on. And I think it totally caught him by surprise and set him back forever.
See, I think that's a fascinating thought, and I'm inclined to jump on the bandwagon with John and say that I think that Satan really did only have one thing on his mind, and in that moment in time, I feel like Satan tried to set up God in a sense of, well, blood has to be shed for them, and you're not going to kill yourself, are you? Like I don't think Satan could have seen, because he was so far from the reality of what God's sacrificial love is like. Either he forgot, either he wasn't just on the same wave. This is all just postulation, by the way, and conjecture. I just feel that Satan wasn't that far ahead in his thought pattern to think that a God like this would love his creation like that, to do a sacrificial act like this, if that makes sense. And I think he got the shock of his life when the plan was unveiled for him to see of a Son of God to enter humanity, to mess up Satan's plan completely and rid humanity from the opportunity of being saved from their grievous sins. And I find that to be absolutely remarkable, because and to speak to on a small point that we were talking about earlier, about when the war took place in heaven and the angels were fighting, that was the opportunity to really consider sides and consider and take on, who are you going to accept as Lord and Savior of your lives? And unfortunately, a third of the angels chose Satan to be Lord and Savior of their lives. And in that moment, their choice was made, and they decided that they did not want any part in the love that God had to offer the rest of all, the whole of creation. So yeah, that's my initial response to that. So Hebrews brings us to a reality, I guess, that that the Son of God was a title that invited us into an inheritance that allowed us to become on par with the very nature that God had always planned for humanity to be in. We then kind of move on to this very unique title, the Son of Man. Now, I get it. Ty Gibson's an Adventist. Of course, he's going to go down this route. But it made so much prophetic sense as to why he traced the notion of the Son of Man, especially from a prophetic perspective. I'm not going to steal anyone's thunder. I'm going to put it out there and ask, what was some of the most groundbreaking things for you, at least, in the titleship of the Son of Man and some of the things that he ascribed to, namely in the Old Testament, and what that meant for us in the here and now? So what did the Son of Man mean to you as you read this chapter? Anyone who wants to go first?
Well, I think first of all, it's the title that Jesus ascribed to himself more than Son of God. Now, he wasn't beyond calling himself the Son of God, but in his conversation, he constantly referred to himself as Son of Man, which I think he said a lot of things that it wouldn't take a genius to figure out that he was referring back to something. And Son of Man was a title that pretty much comes out of Daniel, and not really, I mean, there weren't a lot of other texts, Old Testament texts that or any that I know of that mention Son of Man specifically.
Yeah, but I guess Daniel is, as we could consider it, as little as the book is, but Daniel carries such a weight in prophetic direction. It really does speak not just to the present, but it speaks to the future, way beyond the New Testament.
It sets up Revelation.
It really, really does. And so I'm wondering, did anything resonate with anyone about the identity of Jesus calling himself the Son of Man in relation to the book of Daniel?
Yeah, when the Son of Man term came out, I guess it was partly from the prophecy that was given to Daniel, and he wrote it, and it was in relationship to the different countries and the powers that would come, right? Babylon, Greece, Medo-Persia, Greece,
Greece, Babylon,
and then at the
Rome.
very here's the rock that would come without from the mountains and hit the mountains and establish a new kingdom, the Son of Man. And what I liked about him, there was a lot of comparing and contrasting, right? And the contrasting was a worldly sense of power, and what does Jesus bring to the table with his power? What was his power? What is his definition of kingship? And it was really kind of a stark contrast, right? Satan's, and this is kind of how Satan always presented himself, even in heaven. My kingdom would be so much better than God's kingdom, right? He would advocate his kingdom over God's as a hit. Let me be your ruler. Let me show you how different it would be. And sure enough, let him do it. And this is exactly what happened. So a power ruled by Satan, and it goes through, and we can go and discuss it. But ultimately, at the end, I like the imagery of, yes, there was power versus, love. What does Jesus bring to the table? It's his love. And what does that love look like? It's being a servant. Well, everybody wants to be a love of, I think I love that term. He said the world is pursuing and lifting up love for power, but Jesus, his power is love. Is that's and it shows in him being willing to die for us, right? And at the end, that's his kingdom based on love and service, right? And it was an incredible kind of comparing, contrasting, and that's where the Son of Man comes into the picture. He really was the Son of Man. To each and every one of us, he came to die. He says, his throne is the cross. He wasn't coming to sit on in a palaces where his disciples were expecting him to be, John and James, can I be on your left and right hand side?
Right.
Mary, his mother, had it wrong, and nobody figured it out until he finally was sitting on the cross with his arms spread out, and then someone like Nicodemus finally said, "Okay, that was it. that was the reason why he came. And that's the story of Jesus. And that's the story of being the Son of Man. And his kingdom would continue to move forward to the very end of time.
Dee, did you have any thoughts on the Son of Man?
I think for me, when I hear that Son of Man, it again emphasizes the God's humility by putting himself at our level, and then at the same time, God's incredible selflessness of elevating us, the humanity, to his level. I mean, that two, I see both in playing in that, and I think by describing himself as a Son of Man, he has true. I mean, I think they continue to use the word the eternal solidarity with the humanity. He keeps demonstrating that for us, and yeah, it's incredible. His humility is incredible. His love is incredible.
The culmination in this chapter was so inspirational, to just list off various human kingdoms that led by a certain way. And I'll just quickly read a quote on page one, end of 145, leading on to 146. The kingdom of Christ is eternally sustainable. I'm just coming up from what you said, Dee, not because he uses more force than any other kingdom, but because he rules without force and thereby draws his subjects to himself without ever resorting coercion. Jesus didn't merely come to win the game, but to change the game. This is a stab in the heart of Satan. It literally is, because all Satan wants to do is increase opportunities for mankind to lead by force, for mankind to grow kingdoms by force. And Jesus just tips that on his head. I think somewhere calls it the upside down kingdom or something like that, which I thought was amazing, which leads us on to the last Adam. I found it really incredible. I don't know what you guys thought, that it was really encouraging. We've been following and tracing the idea of Adamship throughout this book, and it's so easily seen that God was looking for another Adam who could do a better job than the first Adam. He tried with Israel, he tried with David and Solomon, and it just goes on and on and on and on. It's so refreshing that Jesus is the final. We don't need to look to any more Adams along the line of the way. Jesus ultimately, the search ends. The search ends, and finally we have found someone worthy enough to invite us into sonship with Jesus, into sonship with God, into that family position where we can take our place, not because we deserve it, but because his grace is so great that he's willing to carry that position that invites us into that space. What about anyone else? The last Adam, what does that mean to you now after reading this?
I thought this was good. I mean, Jesus essentially does what Adam couldn't do, and then he actually does more. I mean, he followed the will of his Father, God, to a T. But then Jesus also fixed what Adam broke, with sinning in this world of sin. And we continue to have brokenness to this day as a result, but we have a hope that this all becomes right again. And I like on page 152, it was like the last, maybe the second to last sentence, or no, third to last sentence. It says, Jesus didn't merely offer redemption to humanity, he fully achieved it. And man, I mean, we so often forget that it's just right there for the taking. And we spend so much time trying to do it ourselves. I mean, it's been achieved, and no one can achieve it better. In all of humanity, Jesus is the only one that's been able to do that. I like, the other thing I like about it is that Ty Gibson's very clear on the point that he achieved it as a human and not as God. That's big. That's big. Which means, it's it's all too late for us now. We're all sinners now, but it's not like he did the impossible. He just did what was supposed to happen before sin happened. And that gives me hope too.
But it validates the idea that it was always God's plan for a human to do it.
Right.
It was always God's plan for us to be the integral part of the journey of salvation. Rather than, in contrast to other religions, it's a God who supersedes and does everything. But rather, the Christian God invites humanity into the actual plan of salvation. And that's why we can relate to this Jesus. I thought that was amazing too. Any other thoughts before we move on to the final chapter, guys?
So,
I think. Go ahead, George.
No, go ahead, Darren.
So the last Adam again, for me, I think, like you just said, as a human, he was the Adam, the Son of God, who finally fully, completely demonstrated the character of God, and just that he is the last Adam, it gives me hope that this end will come soon. That we're not waiting for other Adams, other sons of God to fulfill this God's covenant.
Yeah, I mean, it's been achieved. It doesn't need to be achieved again, and certainly not by me.
Right.
I like the idea that this is it says that through what Christ was able to do, Jesus, in the one paragraph it says, Jesus is the one human in whom all humans are now represented. So he's now the representative head of this new, group of humanity. But then it says this, and into whom all humans are now invited for the acquisition of a new identity. He actually invites each and every one of us to be co-sharers of what he was able to accomplish. And this is interesting because even though he did it for all of humanity going forward, yet there's a possibility that no one would accept that, and Jesus would be the only one in heaven representing us as a human. But because he's now invited each and every one of us, it is not where it's just a blanket statement. Oh, okay, I'm saved because he already did it. I think there's an invitation we actually have to personally accept now, and that's part of our responsibility now. Do we understand it? Do we appreciate it? Now, do we accept it and then become co-brothers? And I think I like that idea. So we have something to do on our end as well.
It's beautiful. Just before we move on, there's one more point that I really like as well. I think in this chapter, he talks a little bit about the idea that God is against monarchies and systems that are ruled by kings, and the idea of it all kind of boils down to this one person in order to govern. I'm looking, here it is, page 161. According to the biblical narrative, God is fundamentally against monarchy as a governing system, and he explicitly told Israel to do so. And he later on talks about, fine, you want a king? I'll give you a king, have a king. And then we see what happens throughout the whole of scripture. And then it towards the end of the chapter, page 169, imagine a world in which there is no self-serving hierarchy, in a world where there's no dominance, but only shared dominion through reciprocal service, a world in which relationships are not organized from top down, but rather from bottom up. Imagine a world in which the top is the bottom, and it goes on and on and on and on. And we have yet to experience what true kingdom leadership looks like. And I would propose that's what Jesus came to try and show when he landed on this planet and said, this is what the kingdom of heaven is like. He was trying to introduce us a completely different way of being human. And I find that absolutely remarkable that would come straight from God's desk, in order to try and show us, guys, I know you wanted a king. I gave you your king, but let me show you, what would you think of a world where I invited you into rulership with, into leadership with? So yeah, anyway, I thought that was pretty special. Our final chapter, the eternal covenant pledge. I'll kick off with a quote on page 175, which I thought was really cool. Because God is love, God was eternally committed to becoming one with humanity in order to redeem Adam's fall and rectify Israel's covenant failure. Our salvation was always upon God's heart as an eternal purpose. Therefore, the prophets spoke of the sonship of Christ and our redemption in him as if it were an accomplished reality before the plan was fully carried out. To start off his chapter, I think Ty Gibson wanted to talk about the identity of Jesus as Son of God. Was it something that existed right at the beginning at creation, or was it something that was a title that he ascribed later on? Does anyone have any thoughts on his presentation on that particular element of Jesus's title?
I do. I mean, he's kind of the whole book, kind of defining that and defending it. And honestly, I don't have a problem with it. I mean, you look at, and I was trying to figure out, the best example. You look at famous people that have, their famous names, and a lot of these aren't even their true names, but you talk about them in their past, their upbringing, and you don't change their name and treat them differently. They're that same person after the fact as they were before the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, maybe I'm just simple-minded, but I don't have a problem with talking about Jesus, before the fact as the Son of Man or the Son of God, knowing full well that didn't happen until the incarnation. And I love the idea of Adam was created and Jesus was incarnated, and all the rest of us on this earth were, basically procreated. I mean, it kind of defines it. I don't have a problem with that, but that's kind of how I've seen it. I mean, it's looking back. It doesn't change his identity, looking back, it's still his identity. We just make it easy on ourselves and refer to him the same way.
I wonder if you guys, what you guys think of, if I was to say to all of you that it is because of sin that the titleship identity of Jesus as Son of God was created. Does that make sense, my question?
Sure.
Yeah, I think so.
What that mean was, if the fall never happened, if Adam and Eve never failed, they were given an opportunity. They were created with free will. They weren't automatons. They were given free will, just like the angels were. And if they had chosen to never sin, then would there have been a reason for God to come into humanity, be incarnated, Emmanuel, and then we would then have the term Son of Man and Son of God? And the answer is no.
Right.
Because then there would be no reason for him to come into humanity, to save humanity within humanity, becoming one of us. So that's a good question, because I don't think that's the case. But because, and this is the question, I think really this chapter really kind of hit me hard, because sometimes there was this question of, the term Son of God, there's not this whole ontological, debate. Was Jesus a Son of God before Adam and Eve, before creation began? Was that his title eons ago, before creation, or was it only given to him because of his begotten status? And when he was incarnated, through Mary, that's his, Son of God, just like Adam and Eve was given, just like Solomon and David was. And the answer to my question was here in this chapter: no. At the moment that God and Jesus in their conference room decided we are going to create a new species, man, and the moment we give him free will, there's that possibility, small possibility, that they may fall. That small little possibility, not guaranteeing, but that small fall. In the planning stages was this plan B. And this plan B was, how are we going to save them in their sin, from their sin? And then God says, I have a solution. I have to be the solution.
So I have a question. I agree with everything Joe's saying. My question is, our relationship with God it's supposed to be perfect, I guess, just for lack of a better word.
Okay.
If sin hadn't happened, we would have a perfect relationship with God. And Jesus came to show us who God was and to help us with that relationship with God. And presumably when we get saved, we'll be back in a perfect world
Mhm.
where we can have a perfect relationship. Is the one perfect relationship the same as the other perfect relationship? Or the result of our sin change that relationship? And does it make it better? Or is it the same, or is it worse?
My answer to I guess my initial answer to that question, and then I guess I'll let you guys comment as well, is I don't think that the memories of humanity will be eradicated from our lives. And I don't think the 4,000, 6,000, whatever the scholars suggest, years of us enduring sin need to be erased. I feel like our relationship with God, for want of a better phrase, perfection, our relationship with God will have the extra historical download of all of what sin has done to humanity and how we interact with God, with the history and legacy of sin being our past, will change the face of how we get to know God on an even more deeper and more powerful level. I hope I'm making sense in what I'm trying to say. I guess I'm trying to support the notion that the world is looking on. It's so fitting that Joe has that background, but the world is looking on at planet Earth.
The universe is looking
on. The universe is looking on at planet Earth and all the other worlds that I believe God has created. Everyone is watching the stage to see how whether sin is going to prevail in the destruction of humanity, or whether God's grace is going to prevail in the saving of humanity. I have a vision that eons from now, in eternity, we will sit down around our campfires and tell our great grandchildren, whatever it is, the stories of what it used to be like when we were on planet Earth in 2020, 2021. And I believe that will add to the context of how we grow. Adam could never have that legacy of having those kind of conversations because the fruit was picked. We have a story with God where the fruit was picked, and that's going to fundamentally change how we relate to God. That's my answer.
So here's an idea I've struggled with, and hear me out and tell me what you think. But my thought is, we get saved and everything gets back to where it is. And Ellen White's very clear that there will never be sin again.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that. I guess the part I've struggled with is we so often forget, and are we unique in the universe, or are there other creatures that forget like we do? I see ourselves as being important and maintaining that memory of what this world is like, because I think once we become saved, we become ambassadors for God to the rest of the universe to make sure that sin never happens again. Living, breathing ambassadors, make sure sin never happens again. And in that role, we do something that God can't do, which is to defend himself, which is what the whole great controversy is about and what's playing out here on Earth. I mean, is that in line with anything anyone else believes, or am I way out there with that?
Well, no, I believe that. I believe that,
Okay.
that our past serves as a function for our future. Definitely. I support that. And I think that's going to be the one thing that takes us forward. Did you want to add? Dee?
No, I was going to say with response to the first question about, I mean, because the use of the title Son of God, you know, because the plan of salvation has always been there even before the creation. I mean, that title, Son of God, had to be there in the plan, but it was just never verbalized because there wasn't a need at that time.
Right.
But like Joe said, as soon as we sinned, you know, and when after he became a human and came, obviously that got used. And then I think what John responds to John, I think even now, right? Even now, when we are whenever we're praising God's name and being a witness to His mercy and His goodness, I believe, like you said, we are vindicating God, and I think that will continue up in heaven as well, as we continue to worship Him and praise Him.
I think, I don't want to belabor this, but you were talking about sitting around campfires and telling stories. I think there's an obligation for us to do that here and now. And in a lot of ways, that's preparation for up there or down here. But once we've been saved as those ambassadors, and that's literally our testimony. And I think I have a hard time with it. I mean, I've heard Joe and his stories, and they're powerful, and some other people. And for me, it's a little harder to do, but I think it is something that has value to our kids and our community, because it makes us human and shows others how God has worked in us.
You know, that's
brought us to where we are.
That's incredibly powerful, and it points to something that Ty Gibson teaches us about propletic readings of Scripture. The idea that there are many Old Testament authors, who write in future tense, even though they're talking about present tense. They're writing about the victories of the future, or they write about the sureties of the future in sorry, did I get it right? In present tense, before it's even happened.
Right.
What would it look like if we did take a more propletic view, way of speaking about the God who is our victory in the now and the here? I think it would actually change the way that we actually navigate life. The fact is this, and this is both true for the present and the future: God is victorious. He is victorious in the now, and He is victorious in the future. God has conquered sin. God has been able to attribute this sonship that we can follow very proudly, knowing that we are part of His grand family. This eternal covenant pledge was set in motion before humanity was even a dot in creation, because God loved humanity before we even deemed ourselves worthy to be loved or not worthy to be loved. And that is the beautiful thing about this whole narrative. God is inviting us into a story to recognize, I knew what I was getting you into, and I made provision for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely amazing. Our time has kind of come to an end. And does anyone have anything burning they would like to add before we close?
No, I was just going to say that I think this is why, just like what you just said, it is so essential for us to really have identity in Christ, so that we are not just, as we're living in this world, we're not just looking in and thinking that maybe there's no hope, or we're just humans without an advocate or helper. I mean, just knowing that Christ already won and that we have this future, and actually it's already here. The kingdom of God is here already in our hearts. And if we really truly understand that and know that, like you said, our response, our life, the way we live, the way we think, I think it can be very different.
Amen. Joe, you wanted to say something?
My point was the whole plan of salvation was prophesied at the Garden of Eden. Remember, I will put enmity between the woman and her seed, and he will crush his head, and he will strike his heel. Satan will strike Jesus' heel. That prophecy was laid out the moment that they fell. It says, I have a plan for you. I have a plan for the sin problem, but it's going to come at a cost. My son, who's going to come in, will come in humanity, but he's going to solve it, and he's going to crush Satan and defeat him. But it's going to come at a cost, and he's going to have to forfeit his own life. That was the story. And the fulfillment came at the cross, right? And at the cross, it could have been, hey, the final chapter, but that's not the final chapter. It's incredible, because what now happens is he goes up to heaven, and now he invites all of us, those who understand this covenant relationship and understand the Bible for what it was meant to be, because Satan continues to try to deceive people. When we see God in his true picture and what he sacrificed, then now he invites people like us to be co-sharers, co-workers, and brothers of Christ, right?
Right.
Now, from this point till the end of time, when he comes, he's just waiting for us to be kingdom of priests, fellow brothers who understand this, like you said, to be sitting around the campfire saying, what is our job, guys? And then take up the torch and bring it forward to the last final race. Not that we are doing more than what Jesus did, right? But we understand what Jesus did, and we now join Jesus, what he did. And then that's kind of like what I think is that's why God delays his time, because he's just waiting for us to catch on and join him. That's, to me, is a fascinating conclusion.
Beautiful. Okay, I think we should call it quits here, guys. I love having these conversations with you. It's amazing. we can go on for a long time. I think that it's really beautiful that we're starting to just understand more and more about this eternal pledge of he was always meant to be one with us, and it makes it so much more less burdensome to recognize that Christ has always wanted the best for that, and the best way he decided to do that was to come into a form to communicate and grant us means in order to be saved. So today we celebrate the salvation of Jesus Christ as it comes through that position of the Son of God. We want to thank you for joining us on this journey, Pages to Progress. You can jump online and see all the episodes and follow on with us on eastsidesda.org/pages to progress, and you'll be able to catch up on the episodes. Next week, we finish the book. We're going to come to an end. We're going to invite you to come and join us on this final episode, and we'll also talk about the next book that we will discuss as we go on to future chapters of Pages to Progress. So this is from us here saying a good evening. Stay safe, look after yourself, and God bless until we see you again. Bye.
Bye-bye.